of Mrs. Joy Buckner. Joy Buckner is a joy in name and spirit and holds a true passion for all things literacy, coaching, and teachers' development. She's a catalyst for moving people beyond their fears to better their practice. A native of Denver, Colorado, UAE, as a teacher, literacy specialist, and reading interventionist, instructional
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience this morning. You are welcome as Ms. Ramat has all welcomed you to this PD session, Assessment Moderation. In this second series, we are focusing on the quality of teaching and learning. If you may recall, the last session focused on creating outcomes, objectives, and feedback, and really talking through how that trio helps in the planning stages to inform effective planning for increased student learning outcomes. So today, we are focusing on assessment moderation. We have with us today Ms. Joy Buckner, quality assurance, a professional who has had ample experience both in the US and in the UAE. So we're just going to jump right into it. Ms. Joy, please get started. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm very happy to be here. Let me just share my screen. And then, Ms. Albeola, I sent you the document that you needed as well. So today, just to give you an idea of what's happening today, we went over our ways of working. So if we look at moderation, what is our working definition of moderation? Moderation is the process of sharing expectations and understanding of standards in order to improve the consistency of decisions reaching an agreement. So today, keeping that in mind, our agenda, we're first going to go through an icebreaker, get to know each other a little bit. Then we're going to look at moderation of assessments and quality assurance, forms of moderation, and then we'll look at putting it into practice. One thing that I always like to say, I speak very quickly. So if for whatever reason, if you are not understanding me, I will not be offended. Just raise your hand in the chat. In Dubai, we go like this. If you're going too fast, you go like this. So if I'm going too fast, just raise your hand and I'll see it in the chat. Or just put into the chat, Joy, you're speaking too quickly. And I will slow down. I try my very best not to speak too fast, but I get away from myself sometimes. I get excited about working with teachers. So, okay, so
I think you're doing fine, Ms. Joy. I think you're doing fine.
Thank you. Wait till I get excited, and then it will speed up. Okay, so do we have the? Oh, I have hands raised. Oh, good morning.
Okay.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you. It's actually the middle of the afternoon in Dubai. So,
okay, yes, we're just starting our day here. I want everyone to give Ms. Joy a huge welcome, and remember that you can use the chat box, okay? Go ahead.
So, and I think that we'll just drop these answers into the chat box as well, unless the poll is ready. Is the poll ready?
It's ready.
Oh, good. Okay. So today we're going to see where you feel about moderation, just a true and false Zoom poll. So the first one is, it's impossible to evaluate the quality of internal school assessments. Do you think that that is true or false? It's impossible to evaluate the quality of internal school assessment. The second question, and I'm not sure if they're going to come up one at a time, so I'll go over them all at once. The second one is, students should pass all assessments.
Okay, yeah, and I think it's fair that we should probably have a few minutes. So we'll give you all like 2 minutes while Ms. Joy walks you through the Zoom poll.
Yeah. And so I'll go through all of them, then have a little think. If you have any questions that come up as a result of these poll questions, let us know, and we can discuss those as well. So the first one is it impossible to evaluate the quality of internal school assessments? That's number one. Number two, students should pass all assessments for a given topic before moving on to the next topic. And number three is assessment grades are more important than feedback. So let's say we have a couple of questions that are coming up. So number one, for the most part, in number one, everyone is saying that most are saying that they think that number one is false. Oh, sorry, I did not launch it. You guys should see it now. My apologies. I thought that the poll had launched and it hadn't. So you should see
it now.
Okay, cool. I was like, why isn't it coming up? So we'll give you a few minutes to take you through that poll. And if you did drop that into the chat, perfectly fine, but go ahead and drop that into answer the poll question as well, if you can. And I see that Emily has her hands raised. Do you have a question? Okay, so it's great that you're dropping everything into the chat, but you should be able to see the poll that came up. So if you see that, please go ahead and answer the questions in the poll, because then we can see all of the answers from everyone. Emily, I see your hand raised. What's your question? Okay, just over a minute and a half left to answer the questions. Looks like we're doing pretty well so far.
And like we always say, some of these activities that we do during these Zoom sessions are absolutely activities that you can try either in person if you decide to do this professional development session in person, or if you decide to do it on Zoom the way we're doing today also. So these are just, ways in which we are also modeling the type of interactions that you can have with your participants. Okay.
Absolutely. I love to model ways all the time of what you can do, especially when we're in a situation like Zoom and you can't be face to face and interact with one another. Something like this gives you an opportunity for everyone to be involved. So Miss Emily, I keep seeing your hand. You can either drop your question into the chat or you can just unmute yourself. Oh, your poll only allows for you to select one answer. Okay, so Elizabeth, your poll is only allowing you to select one. If your poll is only allowing you to select one, that's fine. Go ahead and drop your answers into the chat for me and I'll look at them from there.
How many people do we have? Okay, it seems like just 10 or 43, 10 or 47. We can do better, but maybe it's still early. So people are not really participating so much. I know that we started a little late, so we may need to move forward.
Yeah, okay.
Can you all hear me?
So, but we did have quite a few that dropped into the chat, so I can look at those as well. So let's end the poll now, see what it says. Okay, so. Are you guys seeing the results? It's impossible. Students should pass the assessments given the topic and agreement. Okay, so we're kind of 50-50 on all of that. So, well, Ms. Abiola, I'll turn it over to you. If you were to say, do you think it's impossible to evaluate the quality of internal school assessments?
Impossible is so extreme. It is quite extreme, so and I think within the realm of education, yes, we can agree on certain set standards, but we could also agree that especially when it comes to student learning, there's a lot of gray area that we do need to consider. And helping us to understand this gray area will really help us to focus on the policy once we have a good understanding of the gray area, that things are not always black and white. But Absolutely. What do you do, right? Then what? If it's not black and white, then what are you supposed to do, right? So I think just understanding it and sitting in that gray area, understanding it a bit more can help our evaluators and our school leaders to make better decisions because they have a good understanding of those gray areas. So We'll probably just move on to the next slide.
And
so do we stop sharing the poll? Should we stop or do we just leave it?
Okay. I tried to share it. Is it not coming up on your side?
No, it's fine. I just wasn't sure if we should stop sharing or we just put it aside to now. Maybe we can just minimize it. And if people have different answers along the way, we can revisit it later. But we probably should go to the next slide.
It should have gone off. Is it off now?
Yes, it's off.
Good. So this is over to you.
Okay, so I pulled the fast one on all of you. The answer is neither true nor is it false. Okay, because like I said, there is gray area, and I want us to explore that as we move forward. So it's impossible to evaluate the quality of internal school assessment. Moderation against the curriculum outcomes actually can enable us to evaluate internal assessment, right? So there is some gray area, and in understanding, you're able to make a better discernment as to when it could be true and when it may not be true, okay? For the second one, students should pass all assessments for a given topic before moving on to the next topic. Well, sometimes, okay? When we are talking about mastery-based education or mastery-based learning, we obviously want students, in a perfect world, students would master one topic before you go on to the next. But oftentimes, as we know, learning is not linear. It doesn't exist in one perfect straight line. Sometimes you have to move forward a little bit and then go back a little bit also. And I think even though this is focused on, student assessment, the student-facing side of assessment, it is also important to think about what implications it has for the teacher, right? So if you are anticipating that learning is not linear, then it means that we constantly have to be moved by where students are taking us to. And that's why gathering data, getting feedback like we discussed in the last session is so important, because when you're gathering feedback as to where students are, then you can then align your lessons accordingly. So sometimes, right, if a child doesn't need to have mastered the concept or may have additional opportunities for support, it can actually be acceptable to move on, okay? Then number 3, assessment grades are more important than feedback. The truth is both are important, right? So both are important. And I believe that for the most part, we have always focused on assessment. Generally speaking, we can be better at our different forms of assessment, but we've always focused on that. Now, to make that assessment better, to make that assessment more focused, feedback is crucial to be able to ensure that the assessment is actually accurate to the needs of the student. So grades very well may indicate mastery, but feedback enables the child to progress or to improve in their learning. And when we're thinking about the purpose of increased learning outcomes, it's not just about what a child does in a WIEC examination. We also want to see a tangible shift from A to B. I always give the example of, when I was teaching year 10. I was teaching year 10 and I had a mix of students, high-ranking, gifted students, regular, quote-unquote, normal students, and students that needed more help. And there was a particular student who kept failing in the previous year, had failed the state examination, right? And when I was able to trace, he still failed the following year. But when we looked at the improvement, this student improved by about 25 points.
Wow.
So we had to end up giving this boy an award because he had made the most progress of all the students. So sometimes we can't just depend on just those formal assessment grades. It is good to have a formal system. Okay, we often look at feedback as informal, and I think that's why we don't give it much credit. But if we have a formal system of feedback that includes both formal and informal feedback, then it's something that we could actually use and track. Okay, so next slide. Okay, now over to you.
Is it okay? So
Our dear evaluators and leaders. How many people do we have online now?
We're up to 55.
I think at the bottom. Okay, we're doing much better. We're doing much better. Okay, now.
Participants.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Ramat. Okay, now you are to do the heavy lifting. Where do you think assessment fits within the quality assurance framework? Is it outcomes for learners? Teaching and learning provision? So teaching and learning, curriculum and activities, care, guidance and safety, and or effectiveness of leadership and management. So I know we have 7 core areas that we do typically focus on, but for the purpose of this workshop, where do we think it fits, or does it not fit at all? As you can see with the last question that, with the last interactive question, we asked true or false, and it ended up being neither, okay? So that means that's an indicator that the answer will always not fit neatly for the purpose of this workshop, okay? So feel free to think outside of the answers that we've, that we've set before you. So I think I'll give you just about a minute. So where do you think assessment fits within the QA framework? These 3 contexts are just, suggestions for you to get thinking. Do you think it fits in within 1, 2, 3 of them, none of them, all of them, or other ones? Please indicate in the chat box.
Okay, we'll just give a minute to see some of the responses come up. Okay, so we have 1 who feels that it applies to all. 1 says 3, so effectiveness of leadership and management. Are you saying by 3, are you saying, Magdalene, are you saying that it's all 3 or number 3, so effectiveness of leadership? Okay, effectiveness of leadership, good morning. 2, teaching and learning provisions, all 3. Elizabeth, thank you.
I like that there's such a difference
Me too.
in the answers, and I think that also had to do with us allowing, quote unquote, giving everyone a free hand, knowing that the answers may not be
What you said. It fits into all 3, all of them. Okay, it seems like the kind of the overwhelming majority is saying that it's fitting into all 3.
Okay. Okay, next slide. A lot of people are saying that it fits into all of them. Some people say 1. Okay. So you're right. You are absolutely right, okay? It fits into all, to one extent or the other. So if we know that assessment is important and it can fit into all of them, what implications does that have for our work as school leaders, as evaluators? Okay, so that means we are not just looking at assessment when it comes to teaching and learning. Do we see assessment in other in these other places? Where do we see it most often? And if we don't see it in those other 2, I think most people are talking about, okay, someone said effective leadership and management. How can we plan for that? How can we plan for that? the way in which we create assessment, the way in which we mark is not always going to be the same. Okay, so that's quite difficult as a teacher if we are telling you, that assessment should be seen in the different components, but there's no uniformity.
Yeah.
What does that mean for a teacher? Where does the teacher go? And how are they able to be successful at doing that? And I think, Joy, when you were talking about moderation, this is really where it really hits that nail on the head.
Absolutely.
Okay, so importance of having those standards.
Perfect.
Okay, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yes.
So we should see consistency across formal assessments where it is available. We know it's not always going to be available. We know that it's not always going to be available. So in terms of performance, internal assessment should really show a child's progress or mastery within a curricular area. And this really hones in on that earlier slide where we were trying to figure out, okay, if a child has not attained mastery, should they move on? We're saying that sometimes it's okay to focus on a child's progress, and other times it's okay to focus on mastery, or the two, okay? And this is where the discretion and the professionalism and the expertise of a teacher really comes into play. But having these options is so important. Okay. Then secondly, the ability. Certain cognitive ability testing, such as is it the CAT4 or CAT4?
CAT4, yeah.
Okay, the CAT4. Okay, so we are not so familiar with the CAT4. So if you want to just shed a bit light on the CAT4.
The CAT4 is it's a standardized test, but what it looks at is it groups, like the group that it looks at the mode of learning for the student, like how they best learn. And it breaks it down into 4 categories. And in most cases, students are heavy on one category, right? So they might be very heavy visual learner or auditory learner. But with the CAT4, it gives you a breakdown of what that looks like. And what is great for teachers is that they're able to then say, okay, yes, this student is a very strong visual learner, but that doesn't mean that I don't need to address that student being able to learn auditorily. So how do you take so if you take your results of each student, then how can you use that information, that data that you have on the student for planning to assess and make sure that, yes, you're playing up what their strengths are, but also trying to bring up those weaknesses in the students as well.
I really like that. Yes, and these things are available. I know that there's some free tools and all that. So it's really it's like going to a candy shop. There's so many options, and it's good to know these three main buckets and how we as administrators, as school leaders, can help drive it so that we're not just heavy on one type of assessment, like internal assessment, or like it's known here as continuous assessment, or the formative assessment, right? And then also looking at the cognitive ability testing, like the CAT4 that you mentioned. I think IQ testing and the likes fall into this category also.
Absolutely.
So then the third is
when you spoke about benchmarking earlier, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So when you spoke about earlier, you said sometimes it's fine to move ahead. Sometimes they don't need to have mastered. That's where benchmarking really comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so knowing
exactly, right? Because there's a minimum standard.
Yes.
There's a minimum standard that we're expecting, right? So even though there's variety, there is a minimum threshold that everyone should be meeting for the grade area, right?
Exactly. And especially when you look
so that's where the student performance.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I think there's a
Oh,
lag in the
there is
time.
a lag. So when we are looking
Okay.
at one thing that it's, and I know it's difficult for teachers to especially explain to parents, when you're looking at benchmarking, especially when you're looking specifically at what children should know, sometimes skills should not be learned in one grade or should not be, and so if you're looking at a blending of sounds, that's a skill that will traverse across multiple years of learning. And it's okay if students don't master it. But a lot of times parents are like, oh my goodness, my kids can't read. And they're just looking at the fact that they can't read when, well, based on the benchmarks, they're exactly where they should be. And they're making the progress. So that's where it comes in. That's where it can be important.
Absolutely. I would really like to turn over to our participants. I want you to think through these very large 3 buckets: performance, ability, benchmarks. What do we need to do better? What do you think needs to be done better, either at the policy level, at the implementation level, at the level of schools? What do we need to do better so that within Nigeria, we can, within Lagos State particularly, we can better able grab these 3 buckets and integrate them more effectively? Because I believe we all can agree that they're all important, but we're able to integrate some better than others. What are your thoughts as to why? Why?
And then can I ask a question out of curiosity? So when we're looking at benchmarking, a lot of the times these tests are made for, like, they're used in an international context, but they might be specifically geared towards a certain population. So like CAT4 and MAP, those are for, in most cases, for American students, but they're used very internationally. So do you feel that sometimes as teachers or educators that you find it's difficult, or your students might not be meeting the benchmarks, but it could just because it's not necessarily made for their your context in your school? It's something that I always wonder.
Okay, so Ms. Joy, are you asking if, so are you asking about maybe if it has anything to do with, if it's culturally relevant, if that has anything to do?
Absolutely. I've seen, especially in Dubai, there on certain tests, students might be reading, and they're reading about a circumstance that makes absolutely no sense in the UAE, and they don't do well on the question, not because they don't know the answer, but because it made no sense to them.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if that's something that might come up with benchmarking in Nigeria as well.
That's an interesting one. You know that within Nigeria, we have the West African Examination Council examinations that has been in place since, I believe, the 1950s. You know, although some students do international examinations, you know, geared towards the UK and the US and the likes, you know, for Nigeria, that's what we use. So that is interesting. And that probably speaks to why an examination like WAEC is still in use in Nigeria to an extent, maybe. I'm not sure if we have any responses here. Maybe we will start calling on people.
Well, you know, Mariah, we love to volunteer people. If you don't volunteer, we'll just call out your name and volunteer.
Okay. So let me look at the participants. Okay. So
I've seen a couple that have been quite active, like Miss Elizabeth has been very active. Maybe we can ask her to speak, or.
Okay, yes, go ahead. You can call on her.
Okay. So Miss Elizabeth, I'm calling you out because you've been quite active. How do you feel about the 3 different types of assessment we've been looking at? I think I enabled her to speak. Or just drop it into the chat for us. Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, so sometimes our participants may need help being unmuted. So if the IT team can help to unmute the participants when needed. But I believe we should just move on due to time. So we know that it doesn't always work that way, where there's a perfect integration of the three, and we've talked about that. So for the most part, not all the time, but we can get better at how we do internal assessments, but oftentimes they're inflated. Okay, sometimes students are not fully supported to meet their actual potential. And that's not to say that the teachers are not trying their best, the principals are not trying their best, but it's quite challenging, and it needs a lot of planning, and needs a lot of structure to be able to even, maximize this. Okay, so we can all agree that it's challenging for everybody. Now what? Okay, so look at some of this. For instance, so 90% examination score. Okay, 90%. Wow, the child has done well. So, but look at a possible explanation. The exam results indicate that a child has mastered 90% of the specific content. But this does not mean that the child is working at the 90th percentile. And we know that when we're thinking through percentile, we're comparing their peers in the same class, in the same age range, right? We're comparing them together. So has this child done better than 90% of the students that have also done that exam? It gives us a better understanding of where that particular child falls. And it also helps us to know whether the exam is too easy. What if this is actually too easy for the child? We need to be able to challenge them a bit more. Okay, and I would say for the percentiles, it's not something that we normally even measure here. I know some examinations abroad, like MAP examinations, will tell you the percentile where your child falls compared to all the students that did the exam. I'm not sure if we have that data when it comes to WIAC. Anyone who knows can please share that with me. Okay, then number 2, so an IQ of 10. Okay, so the child might have an average IQ based on their ability to test. Some people are not good at test taking. The child may be brilliant. They take that exam for the IQ and they're like, what is this?
That was me.
Everyone is looking confused. I thought you said this child is good. And the child just doesn't do well. And it could also have to do with the bias of the exam, like how Ms. Joy mentioned. Right? If something has a cultural bias, like if there are certain words that are used in the IQ testing, maybe bin as against trash. Okay, yeah. Those are cultural different references. Or when someone says someone had the hair the color of strawberry blonde. In Nigeria, what's a strawberry blonde? We have strawberries, but which one is strawberry blonde? Culturally relevant IQ testing may be the case. And even children within the US face this too. So it's not just a Nigerian or international issue, right? Because we know a country like the US is very diverse and has to deal with different, cultural background. So this is not accurate in terms of the natural ability of this child. Then the third one, 35% benchmark. This child may perform in one or more subjects at 35th percentile. So they could be at the 90th percentile English, 30th percentile in science. You add it all up and you come up with an average. But that average is not really telling us anything, right? So we have to also think through those benchmarks, so standardized exams, and what information they're telling us that we could actually use. Yeah. Because they mean so much. A1, A2, B, they mean so much, but what is it actually telling us? And maybe at the policy level, at the WIEC level, there's some reform that also is needed to make sure that they're capturing the right type of information for students. Okay.
I'm taking all of these notes because you're bringing up so many things. I'm like, oh, I should mention this. Oh, I should mention that.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So many things that you brought up that I'm like, oh, we can speak on that. So
honestly.
Absolutely. So, okay, so now we're going to look at moderation of assessment and quality assurance. So, we're going to look at how should we assess and when and with what frequency. So we're going to look at the different types of assessments. So we have this in a pyramid, and we'll look to see which one we think is the type of assessment that we're going to do most often. So we already spoke about benchmarking, ability testing. So WIAC, CAT4, the GL assessment, which is a reading assessment that happens a lot here. MAP is a assessment that, like Ms. Abelay was saying, is like it's looking at where is your child falling within a certain percentile and in relation to other students their age.
I actually really like the MAP testing.
I do like MAP testing.
I like the MAP testing. I think measures of academic performance. I think that's what it stands for. Yeah.
And so
I really do like that.
It's well-rounded, and it gives you a look at science, at reading, at math, like across the board. And then it also helps the students know how can they improve. So yeah, I like it as well. But I was one of those, I was that student. So I have a twin sister named Jennifer, always scored really high on tests, like great. And we're twins. I was always in the lowest percentile. I don't test well, but we both academically did very well. And so that's why it's important to have a
multiple.
Exactly. So if we're looking at the second tier down, we're looking at formal, summative internal assessments and teacher or school created tests. Then less formal, formative internal assessments, baseline assessments, quizzes, projects, performance-based tests. And then even less formal than that is formative assessment, so observation. And all the times teachers tell me, well, observation isn't an assessment. It's absolutely an assessment. So self-assessment. Students know what they know and what they don't know. So why don't we ask them more often, right?
Exactly.
Peer assessments, asking questions by students, responses to teacher questions, right? So if we're looking at the different types of assessment, knowing that the tip of the iceberg are those standardized tests that maybe students around the world are doing. And then we all know that everyone's observing, or they should be observing their students, asking questions. What do you think, if you're going to look on this pyramid and drop it into the chat for me, which one do you think that we're doing most frequently? Which one do you think, what type of assessment do you think we should be doing most frequently? Where in the pyramid? So I guess we'll break the pyramid into 4.
I think it would actually be interesting to indicate what you think we're doing now and this actually shows us what we should be doing.
Yeah.
This shows us what we should be doing. But where do you think we are now? Where do you think your school is? Where do you think your school is, or where do you think the state is, or Nigeria, however way you want to, approach it. But where do you think your school is when it comes to
that's a really good way to approach it. Yes. Okay. So if we can make it a little bit, what are you doing the most at your school?
That one is good too.
What are you doing? What are you doing the most? I love the Nigerian.
Yes, we will say that.
I love it. Okay. So
and you can indicate colors. So you can indicate. Yes. We think we're doing exactly.
Yeah. So red, teal. What would we call that? Lime.
Yellow and green.
Yellow and green. Red, teal, yellow, and green.
Miss Joy, you've gone to teal. Why not just blue?
I I'm so American. I'm so American.
You just have to show us that there's a different type of blue. There's a different type of blue.
Okay, I almost said chartreuse. I almost said chartreuse.
Okay, now.
I was like, that is yellow. That's yellow.
Okay.
So everyone, don't be shy. Please drop into the chat. What do you think? And listen, there is no judgment. Like, you're doing what you're doing. We're here to learn and to grow. Yeah. So if you're that school that's only testing your students formally, that's fine. Say it. If you're that school that is not, that's only giving quizzes, only giving projects, that's perfectly fine. Just drop and let us know.
And then it would be interesting to know which of these colors are not even being done at all.
Yeah.
Which of these are not being done at all? Do you think is not being done?
And this actually gives us so much, it's like, for me, gives me so much to go on. If we see what it is that you're doing well, then we know what we might need to play up in future sessions, what we can focus on.
Absolutely.
So I just want, so there's 55 of us on the call. I haven't had one person answer yet.
I hope we all remember our ways of working. It's important that if we are going to get the most of this workshop, we are participating. You cannot give what you do not have. Exactly. So the purpose of being here is to be able to support other schools, support teachers. You cannot get the most of it if you are not participating.
So I like this response. It says we're now mostly on blue, but the yellow color is desirable. And I like that. So you're seeing where you are. So, and I was going to guess that most people are most likely doing some formal summative internal assessments and teacher created tests, right? And that's on average, that's what most people are saying that they're doing. But we really want to move away from that, because not completely away from that. There's always going to be a time where you have to do those summative formal assessments, right? But
we want to add into our toolbox. We want to expand the toolbox.
You want to expand. And the reason why I say that is this. When you only do formative assessments, let's say you introduce the topic, your subject that the teachers, the students learn everything, and you only assess them at the end. If you're not doing the quizzes, the formative assessment, the exit tickets, the projects, if you're not doing those things, you don't know where the disconnect is. You don't know where students didn't get it. You don't know where you need to circle back around and reteach. You don't know if what you're teaching or the way that you're teaching is not reaching their students. I can't tell you how many times I did a formative assessment, a little quiz with my students, and they all got the answer wrong, and they all got the answer wrong.
A specific answer wrong.
Yes, they all got the answer wrong. And I had to say, what am I doing as a teacher that made all of my students misunderstand that? That's
Absolutely.
why it's why it's so important. So I love that someone said that they want to do more yellow, because that's where it's where you really get that firm understanding of what you need to do to drive your instruction. But we're definitely seeing that most people are doing blue. Now, okay, I have this question for you. If you are mostly doing blue, what is it what's keeping you from doing more of the yellow or more of the green? Is it lack of knowledge on how to do it? Is it maybe you are in a school situation that's very traditional and they put a lot of focus on testing? Are parents very much wanting you to test formally, and so you're falling in line with what parents at your school are wanting, because we all know what happens? What's kind of keeping you from going into the yellow and going into that scary part of the green? Blue, blue, blue.
Okay, so I will call on Adams H.O. Adams H.O. Please shed more light as to the reasons to why there seems that there's a focus on one or two of these forms of assessment against all four. Adams H.O.
Either unmute or just type it into the chat for us. Miss Elizabeth told us that she is overseeing a class right now, so she wasn't able to unmute. So I told her that. Hi, Adam.
Hello, ma.
How are you?
I'm good, ma. I'm in a program, ma. I'm monitoring a program, ma.
Okay. So can you tell us what you're mostly doing? Are you doing blue, red, green, yellow?
Okay.
Okay, you can indicate it in the chat box, please.
Okay, ma.
You
Okay,
can
ma.
indicate it in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay,
Everyone drop into chat.
Mrs. Onigbogi,
She's calling around something.
some people I know are also monitoring today also.
Miss
So you
Elizabeth
can always,
sorry, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Miss Elizabeth made a point, and I want to know more. So she said she's careful.
At the same time.
Hello, Mrs. Onigbogi, I hear you.
I'm gonna ask her. Okay, I think she's muted now. So Miss Elizabeth made a point. She said that she's careful with yellow because sometimes it interferes with completing the syllabus. And she's careful with green because sometimes it may lead to bullying. Can you tell me more? Because I can see how you might feel that way in terms of like the syllabus and having a certain amount of information that you have to get done. But at the same time, these are not they shouldn't distract you from what you're teaching.
I think also, I think before Miss Elizabeth responds to that also, I think it also has to do with our approach. So even though it states things like child observation, self-assessment, if you're looking at it like a formal assessment, or you're looking at it for something that it's not, then it becomes an issue, right? Because, but if you are integrating it into your lesson planning, if you're integrating that I'm going to ask this specific child this question, if it's in your lesson, if you are saying that everyone is going to do a self-assessment, after a unit, it's embedded, it's planned. So it doesn't feel as if you are not working or you're not teaching. I think oftentimes the role of teaching seems very formalized. And the informal aspects of teaching, we don't always understand the value that it can bring because we've never really done it. So I think what Ms. Elizabeth said is definitely valid. That some people may feel bullied, that they're calling on them or they're not ready. And last time we were online, we talked about the TLAC, the Teach Like a Champion strategies, and how there's so many there that can assist, especially with these more informal types of assessments. So even something like cold calling. So students who don't always like to participate, but if they know that for these few lessons, I'm going to be cold calling. So in their mind, they are prepared. So from the very beginning of the lesson, they are listening, they're paying attention. This woman can call me. She has told us she's going to cold call us. And practicing that, you can't just tell people you're going to do something and they don't really know, how it's going to work. So in order for the students to not feel like you are picking on them, practicing it, teaching them how do we cold call in the class. That can even be those are one of those lessons that come in the beginning of the term when you're just getting to know one another, and you may say, okay, we're going to focus. You know, you will see that I'll be doing some different strategies to make sure everyone gets to talk. I'm going to be cold calling. I'm going to be giving you writing prompt when you come into the class, and then you practice it with them, what your expectation is.
Yeah.
So that way, everyone is ready. No one feels ostracized. I don't know if you can hear me. I believe it's telling me my internet is unstable. So I will just stop talking for now.
No, we can hear you. Well, and I think just to piggyback on what you were saying, it's about setting that culture in your classroom. Like for my students, it took them one time to make fun of someone or make someone feel uncomfortable about about a question or an answer. It took them one time, and I set that expectation that there are no silly questions in this class. We lift each other up. We do not break each other down. Like you set that in your classroom,
and it's not by chance. It's something you strategically do.
Absolutely. And you will see that your students want, because let's say you're that student that doesn't test well, who doesn't test well at all, but I'm willing to ask raise my hand and ask questions and do exit tickets. Like there's so many things you can do. Write on a piece of paper at the end of the class, 3 things you learned today, 2 things you want to know more about, and 1 thing you're confused about. That's an assessment. It doesn't take anyone they don't have to speak out. They can just hand it to you. There's so many ways to go about it.
And that's the 3-2-1 that we have been using even for these workshops that we've been doing.
Yeah,
so like I said, we always want to model what our expectation is and what you can use tomorrow. You should be able to use not just the content, but even the strategies across different contexts. Okay, let's go on to the next slide.
So what we are saying is that, and if you're looking at what we said, and I know this might be out of your comfort zone, but the forms of assessment you should be doing most frequently are at the bottom of the pyramid. So the less formal assessments, so formative assessments, checking for understanding, child observation, peer assessment, student responses, those are something that should be happening every single day in your classroom. And then up from that, quizzes, projects, performance-based tasks, baseline assessments, that should be happening at least every week in your class. And then you go up to formal summative assessments. That should be at the end of your end of your unit examinations, right? And then those benchmarkings, the top of the pyramid, those should be the least frequent. So the blue that most people are doing now, that from what you said in the comments, that should be maybe at the beginning of a unit, at the end of the unit. It should not be what you're doing most. Where you get the most bang for your buck, sorry for the American saying, is those less formal formative assessments, internal assessment quizzes, Kahoot, answering questions on Menti, exit tickets, spelling tests, although I really don't like spelling tests, but they're one. All those little pieces that you give that add up to give you a lot of information about your students. And you want to make sure that they're well-rounded. You can't always assess your students in one way because your students don't all learn in one way. You have to come from different angles. And so much can be done by asking questions, letting students ask questions, and letting students speak to each other and assess each other. Do we have any questions about that?
Yes. So, and another thing I just wanted to make clear is that, we are very aware that some things are fixed, right? So the percentages are fixed, for the most part. I know in our public schools, they're fixed 60%, 40%.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that the one that is most frequent will then be most weighted. No, that is not going to change the weighting. What it does, it expands what is being done for those different weights.
Yeah.
So for instance, if for the 60%, maybe before is just or for the 40%, maybe it's just 3 exams. Maybe that 40% can be split, you know, so maybe more things could go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe quizzes can go there.
Hmm.
You understand? So it's basically, we're not saying that you need to change your weight. No, please don't get us in trouble. No, that's not what we're saying, because we know you don't have, those things are fixed and it's fine. What we are just saying is gather multiple means of getting feedback as to where your students are. The more feedback you get and the different tiers that they exist will even assist the teacher in their lesson planning to be more impactful, to increase student learning and to increase student progress.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just about students getting 90% or whatever have you. We want to be able to say that within an academic year, your students moved up 3 levels, 2 levels, 1 level. Even the best of the best should be challenged to be able to do more than what they are doing if we're to meet them where they need us to meet them at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like the bottom, the green, those aren't even things that I give any points. Like you don't even grade them. They don't get, it doesn't even go into a percentage. So in most cases, so let's say you're looking at student self-assessment on, maybe you gave them independent work to do during the class, like in a group, well, maybe they did group work or independent work. They answered some questions on their own. Then they turn with their partner and they go over together what the answers were, how they did, and they give each other feedback. You don't have to mark that. They just marked it themselves. Then you look at it, it gives you so much information. So I understand, yeah, absolutely, things are fixed, but all of these can fit within that. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get you guys to participate again. Can we think about, if I was to look at,
in all fairness, I also wanted to state that I know for the my evaluators, many of them are on inspection visits today.
yeah.
So we know that you're on inspection visits, and that's why it's available on YouTube for after.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not expecting you to be inspecting a school and be doing training at the same time. It won't be optimized. So the expectation is, if you have you know, like an urgent inspection that is to be done today, if you're inspecting, that you'll be able to go back to the YouTube and watch the course later on. I just wanted to make that clear.
And you know, I work with the teachers who are in HP Idea program, and I know that sometimes you have full classes and you're also coming to one of our sessions and juggling a lot of things. So if you can't respond right now, I understand completely, but I also still try. So if you were going to look at, just give me, because you might be looking at this, what do you mean by an internal assessment? What does that mean? What do you mean by a baseline assessment? Ms. Joy, tell me what this is. So let's talk about what each of these might be. So can someone drop in the chat for me, if I were to say a summative assessment and summative internal assessment, what does that mean to you? What do you think that is? What would you say if someone says a summative assessment? So just in the interest of time. So that could be a unit exam. That could be if you've read a novel, that could be the end of a novel exam. Those are those tests that you do at the end of the test to see that covers everything that you just learned, right? Could be a final examination, a midterm examination. That's what we look at formal summative internal assessments, right? So those assessments that teachers or departments are creating, everyone is taking this test, and it's going to assess students on the sum of what they have learned during the course of their unit or the course of their semester or what have you, right? And that's why they are less frequent, because it's a huge amount of information that you're testing them on, right? So if we're looking at formative assessments, these could be anything. They could be pop quizzes. They could be, I know I say it all the time, but I love them, exit tickets. They could be baseline assessments of so what students knew before they start at the beginning of the unit or the beginning of the week, and what they learned, what they know at the end of the week. It could be a pop quiz in the beginning of the class and the same quiz at the end of the class, so you see what growth they made during the course of that lesson. It could be projects. It could be performance based tasks. So maybe students are writing a poem or doing a theatrical something to demonstrate their learning. It's all those little projects that students are showing you what they know, demonstrating the learning that's taken place, right? So if you look at summative, think about this should maybe only happen once or twice. But the less formative assessments, those should happen every single day. You should be doing some type of assessment to see, even if it's a quick hands up, who understands this? You go around and you ask a couple questions. There are all those little things that you should do. You should probably do a formative assessment 2 or 3 times during the course of a lesson.
And there's another thing that I remember I used to do, as a teacher. So like you mentioned, the summative, examinations, are very few and far in between. Mm-hmm. Then you have the less formal ones like the quizzes and all. So what some teachers can do is that they can take a series of these less formal assessments.
Yeah.
Right. So you can say an exit ticket, participation, note taking, anything that gives you some information. You can take about 5 or 6, and 5 or 6 of those can be equivalent to one less formal assessment.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not that they count the same, but you can say, okay, there's a participation grade that when I add your participation for the entire term, it's equivalent to one quiz. Yeah. So that's another way where you can sneak it in also, so that the children are accountable also. They're accountable, so they know that we have to participate, we have to come ready. So whoever's looking for pencil or biro, participation is low.
Exactly.
Right? Whoever's not prepared, whoever's not copying notes. Yeah. You understand? Those are things that you can also use, because I believe most people will be wondering, okay, how does it fall? I have a mathematical equation that I need to fulfill, and it's valid. Yeah. It is absolutely valid. Absolutely. Same thing with like a project or a performance-based task, right? So if you have a project, there are 5 people in the group, and they've all worked together on one project. So maybe each person has a role to play to create a larger, grade. And based on their role and based on how they've succeeded at their role, will they get a grade? So it's not that, okay, group A got a B, so everyone gets a B. It might not be the case. Because we actually want to know how each person did given the task for what they were supposed to do. Okay.
So I'm going to challenge you all to do this. Since we know that the yellow and the green should be the majority of what is of the assessments that's taking place, but we know from this group, most are saying that they're mostly doing blue. I just want to challenge you to choose one thing from the yellow, one thing from the green, and try it out. And send me a picture, send me a note. I'll give you guys my WhatsApp. I just want to see how it goes. Send me a picture of your students doing a project, or students doing self-assessment. Just choose something and try to step outside of your box and see how it goes. And then let me know. I'm tasking you all with that, if we can. Okay, so
Okay.
Ms. Abdullah, it's over
We
to
can,
you.
I'm sure we can. Let's move on to the next.
Yep, over to you.
Okay, so we know, yes, so that we know that less formative internal assessment are made up of different type of, tasks, so to speak. So baseline assessment. So when children are first coming into school, where are they? Where are they in the middle of the term, in the middle of a unit? These quizzes, projects, performance tasks, and all. What are they telling us? What are they telling us? If we know that we're doing this more frequently than we're doing examinations, then it has to be for a reason. Okay, and the reason is not just to measure student learning and progress, it is also to make the teacher more effective as they plan. Okay, so do we measure what we treasure? If we're really saying
Oh, I love that.
that it is what we treasure, then we're measuring. What does that speak to, and what does that say about where we are and what would this quiz assess, and how might the teacher use the quiz to plan teaching and learning? So I want you to look at these two questions, look at the answers. What age group do you think this assessment is targeted toward? And do you think mastery is required for the child to move on? So if the child doesn't get these two questions right, should they not move on? Yes or no?
Okay.
I'm going to give us about, we're actually running, running behind a bit. So I'm going to give us about a minute. So number one is, what age group do you think this is targeted toward? Do you think the child needs mastery before they can move on? And how, this is the most important one for me, for the purpose of this workshop, how might the teacher use the quiz to plan teaching and learning?
Yes.
Those are questions I want you to really think through.
It really comes down to that last question. How are you going to use it?
Okay. So those questions will be there, but let's just move on because we don't have much time.
Okay. So just more, I'm happy to, would it be best for us to?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, and we can always send them off them?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do this one. So the role of moderation, do you want to start here?
Okay, so we have two students. If you can see, one work sample is showing the water cycle. I believe they're all showing the water cycle, but they're two student examples of student work. Okay, so two teachers gave their students the same homework assignment. Mrs. Balogun gave students one an A+. Sorry, there's an error there. I'm an English teacher, so I always notice grammatical error. Mrs. Ayani gave her student a B. So student one got an A+. Student B got, student two got a B. You want the teachers to approach marking uniformly.
Mm-hmm.
How do we address this? How do we address the discrepancy in the grade? One child got an A+, one child got a B. We may not be able to role play, but if we can just advise, how will you get, and think of everything we've done, I'm giving you a hint, not just today. How can we make sure that both teachers are on the same page when it comes to grading? Because the students were given the same assignment.
And I think student B was robbed.
Absolutely.
Student B was robbed because student
Student B even gave the steps. Student A
wrote
just
it out.
labeled and identified.
Student A just cut. Student A just cut and pasted.
Cut and paste. Yes. Cut and paste. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
They have access to markers. Student B used color pencil. But look at the explanations that were given. How do we approach this? Remember, the more we participate here, the more we could actually help our teachers and help our schools.
Let's see here. Oops, sorry. I thought there was one more thing. So I guess if we can drop in the chat, what are some things that you could, let's say this is a team, these are team members. What could have been done prior to giving out this assignment to ensure that both teachers were going to be using the same criteria to assess this assignment? Because if I was student B, I was that student that would have challenged it. Like, why did this person get this and I got this? So what could we do to ensure that something like this doesn't happen?
If I call people now, they will say they're on the field though.
Exactly. Well, I don't know, Ms. Avila, should we just kind of talk about what we think, what comes to mind when you see it, and I can talk about
we can go ahead.
So for me, I think it's most important for students to demonstrate an understanding of their learning and that they understand the concept. And if I'm going to look at that.
Oh, Mrs. Monica Ario. Yes.
Yay. Okay. Can we, let me see.
Ms. Monica Aria raised her hand. Please allow her to talk.
Yes. Okay, she's permitted. If you can just unmute yourself. Okay, I sent her a message to unmute. I'm so excited about a hand raise.
Same here. Let me try to unmute.
Yeah. Ms. Monica, you just have to unmute yourself. I tried to unmute, but I wasn't able to.
Okay, it would be helpful if the tech can help unmute Miss Monica, because more than likely she's unable to do it. I'm sure she's tried. So, okay, we'll wait for Miss.
I've tried to unmute her, but it's just going on.
Okay, Miss Monica, if you can just indicate it in the chat box then, but thank you for raising your hand. And then I think there was someone said something in the chat.
I think it was just
someone. Okay, so someone said both teachers should use the same marking criteria. Absolutely, absolutely. Ms. Joyce, you can continue.
So for me, like in this situation, I love a rubric, so that students know exactly what they need. And then you can mark it against that. And then it also gives you an understanding of what they know, what they don't know. And so it's there in black and white. They have the grading rubric, they have the expectations, everyone's working from the same starting point. And to me, it just makes it the process more clear and concise. So I always go to a good rubric.
I would say likewise. I don't know, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, likewise, I use rubric for everything. Even my evaluators, they know we use rubric. So for an assignment like this, students should have been given the criteria for success. And oftentimes, criteria of success is where you would now draw the rubric from. So it's helpful to even do this with students so they understand. Oftentimes, before I would have students do an assignment like this, if I have it available, I will give them maybe 5 different samples of students' work from the past. I will erase the student's name. I will black it out so they don't know who the student is, if the student is still in the school. And I will tell them what makes this good, what makes this not so. So they will now say, oh, I will tell them to see which one is best. Scale, give it a grade from 1 to 5. And I will, at the back end, I would have made sure that they have a good, medium, and poor copy of the assignments. Maybe just give them 3. Then they'll say, okay, this is very good because they explain, it's colorful, it's creative, it uses the vocabulary. I'll say, oh, this one is so, but they didn't really explain. It's not even creative, it's not colorful. Then they'll say, oh, this one is not good at all. They don't even know what they're doing. So then, it's the students that came up with it.
Yeah.
So they think that they are the ones, they think that they're the ones, they think they're the ones that have set those things in place. And I said, oh, you're right. That one is the best one. Because so we're going to be successful at this assignment, we're going to look at creativity. Creativity will maybe be use of watercolors or crayons or whatever have you. Maybe we'll look at use of vocabulary of the unit.
Yep.
Then maybe we'll look at the content, how it is explained. Even if it is just those 3. Then they'll say to get an A+, you have this to this extent. Maybe uses between 3 or 5 vocabulary. You understand? So you create the rubric. Oftentimes you can do it on your own and you can go over it with the students, or you can go backward and design it with them. Oftentimes, if you have planned strategically, children know what makes sense. They know what is good and what is not so good when they see it. In fact, they're even more judgmental than we are. I found that they're much more harsher than we are. Give the person a 0. They don't deserve any.
Students are so harsh. They'll be
They're very harsh. So I like to include them because I said you are the one that said we should use 0. So it is, so exactly, Ms. Joy. So having a rubric is very helpful so that we're on the same page. And it also allows the teachers to make sure they're challenging the students the way they're supposed to be challenged.
And
we don't want a child, if this student got an A+, what do you expect them to do next time? They won't do anything like what student B is doing because they said, the simple thing I did got an A+. I don't need to stress myself. You understand? So it is helpful for the teachers for planning. It is helpful for the learners to make sure that every learner is able to make progress and every learner is able to be successful. There's no hidden agenda anywhere.
And we don't, for student number 1, the one thing that I keep going back to is I have, as a teacher, if I am looking at that, I have absolutely no idea if that student understands the water cycle. I don't know.
Exactly.
And so, but student 2, I know that they understand it, or they were at least able to research, find the information and put it in the right order, which to me says something too. So it's what information, like, are they demonstrating their learning and understanding, and can I gauge what they know and can do? I think we have some questions. Okay, they were from what they are doing, mostly in blue. Okay. So yeah, Emmanuel, the teacher should tell the students his or her expectations and use the same marking guide. So absolutely, a simplified way of saying.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, love it. Okay,
exactly.
So move on. Okay, moderating essentials. I think this is me. So when you're looking at moderating the aspects of moderation, there's some things that you really should be mindful of. So make sure that it's evidence that there's evidence-based discussions, right? You need to have tolerance of different views. You want your students to demonstrate their learning and their understanding in the way that works for them and works in their brain, not the way that you want to see it, because they might see it in a different way that makes complete sense, and that's fine. Be open View the differences as an opportunity to learn. I can't tell you how many times as a teacher, I explained something and the students didn't get it. And I asked the student to explain it and they explained it in a way that I never would have thought of. And every student understood what it was. Be open to hearing other ways of explaining and assessing. Have that willingness to adapt your thinking. Now, I know as educators, we are creatures of habit. We like to do things the way we like to do them, but we can't. If we're going to step into the new way of teaching and making sure that our students are able to demonstrate their learning and thrive, we need to adapt our thinking and be willing to be open and change and accept the information the way that it comes to us. Use agreed reference materials. This helps to be able to know that your students are going to sources that are appropriate. We all, in the day of an age of the internet, we need to make sure that we know that the information that they're getting is accurate and that we're safeguarding our students when they're going in.
So they can't say they got something on Instagram.
No.
Or Wikipedia.
No.
Or just Google. No. We have to, and you know what, to be totally honest, that's why it's so important to scaffold. Absolutely. Right? Students are not going to get to this place, neither is the teacher going to get to students understanding this overnight. It's not that you just list it. No. Evidence-based discussions. That may take like like 4 or 5 lessons. Yeah. And it doesn't mean it has to be separate from your main lesson. Yeah. It doesn't have to be separate from your main lesson. It will be integrated into the scheme of work that you are to teach. You will just use these as vehicles on how to teach it. So it's not that we're saying, okay, DG, you want us to do scheme of work, then you want us to learn moderation. How many things? No. These things are embedded. They're coded. Okay, they're to be, exactly, they're to be embedded, and everything needs to work within that ecosystem.
Absolutely. And it takes time, but you'll get there. Just take small steps. What we say, accurate judgments will support their student learning and use multiple sources of evidence. Make sure that that's required.
So multiple sources of evidence can be newspaper, encyclopedia, things that we know and we've taught them are okay for them to use. Mm-hmm. Evidence-based discussion, obviously, if you are talking about evidence from the text, so if you are reading Romeo and Juliet, they will have to say, Shakespeare said. Yes. Right? In Act 2, whatever. So it's not that they're just saying. When they're saying things, they need to make reference to actual evidence.
Yes, and this can be done at any level. Any level. So I taught first grade for the majority of for most of my teaching in high school, but mostly first grade. And if we did, we would play a game called Stump the Teacher, and they'd have to ask me questions about a book that we read. And I'd be like, and they'd ask me the question and I'd be like, okay, I'd answer it. And I'd be like, where does it say that in the book? Show me evidence. And they had to go in and show me evidence. And it could be a picture that they saw, it could be actual words, but if you get them in the habit of citing their evidence and showing you proof, it doesn't matter how old they are, they all can do it. You just have to teach them, have to model it.
Exactly.
Okay. Me too.
Okay. So how do we know if we have moderated well? Okay, how do we know that we've done this thing called moderation well? We should be able to answer these questions. Where did you place your judgment and why? So is it based on being subjective? Is it based on evidence? Is it based on something that is agreed upon? Where did you place your judgment and why? Is there consensus? Talked about, is it something that has been agreed upon either in your school, in your district, best practices globally? Is there consensus? How does your evidence relates? Can be here, and then your illustrations or your expectations are over here. There has to be alignment. The evidence must support those illustrations. Then what do others think and why? You know, Ms. Joy talked about, you know, being flexible and thinking. Oftentimes, students will they will surprise us.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I mean, the conclusions they can get to, and even our teachers too. If you're working with the school, if we allow them to really, if we give them the tools and they know how to use those tools, not just tech tools, but knowing that there's a different framework or they can think outside of the box, right? What do others think and why? Okay, so even when we have like a rubric and the reasoning behind it may not have been captured on the rubric, but the reasoning, I mean, it has even made, it has now made a need for you to evaluate, to reevaluate your rubric.
Yeah.
Then they should be, you know, discretionary, they should be scored accordingly because obviously the rubric was not sufficient, right? Then have we reached a consensus on the best fit? So out of all the things we can consider, what can we generally agree should be the expectation of our students or our teachers or whoever it is we're creating this rubric or this moderation for? You know, have we reached a consensus on what the best fit should be based on the environment, based on expectation, based on global best practices, based on resources? We should be able to come to some sort of, you know, agreement. And you see this running thread of agreement. You see this running thread of agreement and being able to prove. So having evidence and being able to prove within reason that it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, okay, is this for you?
Can be.
Yes, okay.
So preparing for moderation, how, okay. So we're looking at how would you like to implement moderation? When does your moderation needs to take place? Who is going to be involved? And is it going to be within schools, across schools? And sometimes it's a mix. It could be both. So maybe there's a mandate that's been passed down that all schools need to do. And you'll have to come to a consensus across schools. Sometimes you might need to come to a consensus across grade levels or year groups. Do you guys do grade levels or year groups in Nigeria?
Year groups.
Year groups. So so you just have to sit down and look, ask these questions of yourself. When does it need to take place? Who needs to be involved? I love the suggestion of getting your students involved with moderation. It makes all the difference.
And what I like about moderation is that it is a framework that can be used across levels, right?
Yes.
If we look at the entire workshop, we were talking about, you know, student learning outcomes and that, you know, pyramid, right? So moderation can be used there. Then when we looked at the sample student assignments, moderation can be used there. Moderation can be used everywhere, although today the focus was on assessment, right? Because we know how important that is for everything, right? Teaching and learning together. But the main thing I want you to really take away from is that it is a way of thinking that can be used across your different stakeholders. You can use it for your parents. You can use it, you know, for your school. You can use it for your teachers. You can use it for your school leaders. You can be about standards. It's really about standards that work and standards that are feasible. Yes. Right? Standards that people can actually be successful at.
It used to be a very scary concept for me. And I don't know why, and I think it was just, I felt like it was a lot to put rubrics together or kind of think of these things up front. But then as I got more comfortable with it, I can't live my life without it at this point. It's like my roadmap. It's where I know where I'm going and how I know if I got there. And if you think of it from that perspective, to me, it makes sense. And it could just be, it's so simple to just say, okay, I'm teaching this. This is how I know that if I know that the students truly understand it, I'm going to see them doing this. If they don't get it, this is what it's going to look like. If you're assessing teachers, if a teacher is truly gifted with the way they're delivering the lesson, this is what I'm going to see. And if they're still working towards it, this is what they are. I look at it as from what am I going to see? What is going to be happening? And if you put it into that framework, I think it makes it a little bit less scary. I hated rubrics at first. It really was a difficult concept for me, but now it makes my life so much easier.
And I think, the purpose of this workshop really is baby steps.
Yeah.
Right? So no one is saying you just run inside and just start doing it. No. Try to think through a different way first.
Yeah.
Think about how things can be different. So this is like a taster, and we've given different examples of how it could be used. And then, the heavy lifting would be on us to say, okay, where do I think I want? And that's where this first question comes. Where can moderation take place? I know we've really gone over time by like 15
I'm gonna
minutes.
see if I can send this to, can we send this to everyone and just have them do the assignment on their own?
We will, yes. So everything will be available on LagosLearnsTogether.com. So an updated run sheet, an updated deck, once it's been signed off, will be available there within the week. So everyone will have access to it. And of course, this particular training is available on YouTube.
So can we just make their assessment or their assignment to just try one new thing and let us know how it goes? Try to make a rubric, try to do some type of new formative assessment. If you do a Kahoot or exit tickets, or you're just doing a checklist, or try something new. I'm more than happy to send out some examples, or you guys can message me anytime. I love talking about this kind of stuff. But I just task everyone to, if there's something that caught your eye today, walk away and challenge. Because if we come to these workshops, we don't do anything with them. I challenge you to just pick one thing and commit to doing it, and then just let us know how it goes. I guarantee you're gonna be excited about it. Let me see. I think we have some questions.
Okay, so we can quickly take them and then we can round up.
Yeah. Nope, it's just they're not questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I want to thank you all for attending today's workshop. I know that maybe some of us thought when they had assessment, maybe we would have been thinking about it in a very traditional sense, right? Maybe I will teach you how to do exam monitoring or catch people cheating or things like that. But we really want to focus on how we can look at assessment differently, and how it's really a framework, right? It's a framework that's based on standardization, and we can use it for everything that we do, particularly when it comes to teaching, your planning and all that, and learning. So all the information we gain from student learning, if we're just getting assessment just for getting assessment's sake, what is the point? Yeah. We want assessments to inform the decisions that the teachers are making, that schools are making about how students can move forward.
Yes.
Right? Because the teachers are really the ones that are able to do that. But they need the support of the school administration, their district, to be able to do that. Patients of them also. So we understand that it's an entire ecosystem that must work together. What today's workshop was is just to highlight different ways in which it could be done and a different way of thinking when it comes to moderating assessment. So without further ado, I want to thank you, Ms. Joy Buckner, for being with us here today and sharing of all of your depth of knowledge about quality assurance when it comes to assessment moderation. I want to thank all OEQA evaluators and OEQA team members here today that have made today possible. I definitely want to thank all of our participants, our private school teachers, school owners, our principals that made time out to be here, despite the fact that we started a bit late and we're ending even later. We really do thank you, and we're hoping to see you on our future workshop series. I want you to know that I believe this is the 7th out of 20 workshops that we are holding. And this current series is based on the quality of the provision of teaching and learning. So we'll see you next week. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, my DG man. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this series today. And please do remember that we can always go back to www.lagoslearntogether.com for the series under PD with the DG. Thank you very much, as we look forward to seeing you in the next series and module. God bless you all.